Hi, this is Corey Johnston, and today's lesson is going to begin in the 100th Psalm. And because of the brevity of the Psalm and its immediate successor, we're going to try and squeeze in the 101st one after we comment on the 100th one. But first things first, this is the fitting capstone of a succession of royal psalms which extol Yahweh's role as the king of the universe, sovereign over the created order, and what that means in himself and what it means for us. And it also begins the 93rd Psalm, and then the 94th isn't a royal psalm, but the 95th through 100th are, and it's identified in its title as a psalm of thanksgiving. Thanksgiving is the righteous response. Expressions of gratitude and praise are befitting to the sovereign king, and its author is unidentified, as are the majority, or if not all of the ones in the 90, range from 90 to 100. So the opening verse reads, "Raise a shout for Yahweh, all the earth." So the entire created order owes praise and shouts of glad rejoicing and gratitude and praise for its creator. And so this is not this exhortation to praise him is not limited to Israel alone. They were the covenant maker with whom he had endowed with the divine purpose and blessing, but the extension is all the earth. So all the peoples, all the tribes, all the tongues, all the nations, all the people. Serve Yahweh with gladness. Come before his presence with singing. Now, service for Yahweh is self-evident. He himself is our servant. He's not a dictatorial deity, but he exists to provide our provisions and bestow upon us blessings. Ergo, it's not enough to serve him, but we must do so with a glad heart, because this is the response. He weighs the hearts, he discerns the hearts, and a glad heart is a worthy and acceptable attitude before him. And come before his presence with singing. Any worship service without singing is not quite a worship service. We gather in community to sing songs together. This is an integral component of any worship experience. Know that Yahweh, he is Elohim. He has made us, and we are his people, and the sheep of his pasture. Now, this verse right here is a reference to Israel, and he made us entails more than merely created. He created all the people inside and outside of the covenant nation, but he made Israel, he designed them, he delegated them the special task of making him known. He made himself known to them in order that they might make known him to the entire earth. And so this claim of ownership is a great privilege, but it shouldn't instill entitlement. It should instill obligation and duty, and we of the church today, as his new covenant people of the new covenant, ought to have the same attitude and disposition towards belonging to him. He belongs to us, we belong to him. Anything that belongs to us, and when we belong to him, no devil can steal our dreams. But we also have to extend the belonging. We have to share him with others. So there's no sense in selfishly hoarding the bestower of all the blessings and all the provisions to oneself. We have to make him known to those outside of our circles and within our circles. Enter into his gates with thanksgiving, and into his courts with praise. Give thanks to him. Bless his name. Now, the gates and the courts would have been familiar features of the temple in Jerusalem. They had gates and courts and yards and inner sanctums and sacred of sacreds and different designated locations, but on the exterior were gates and inside were courts, and they are commanded or instructed or encouraged to enter into the gates, go into the temple with thanksgiving, that they should have the spirit of the attitude of gratitude well before they enter into the gates. So there is an element of preparation in proper worship. And praise, when by the time they go into the courts, they should be praising. This is the natural extension of gratitude and thanksgiving. And give thanks to him once more. Bless his name. He blesses us. Ergo, we must bless his name. And this is the third commandment, which is to respect or reverence the sacred name and the one it is attached to, through whom the power of that name operates. For Yahweh is good, his kindness is everlasting, and his truth endures to all generations. These are attributes, character facets of Yahweh. He is good, not in the human sense, but in the absolute sense. And his kindness lasts forever. He is immutable by his character. All of his attributes have no expiration dates or any lapse at any place or time in eternity. And his truth endures to all generation. Truth, by its very nature, is eternal in essence. It will always, what was true today will always be true tomorrow and was true before it. So his truth extends to all generations. So his sovereignty exists not only geographically, but across the vast reaches and expanses of time. So that being said, we're going to move on to the 101st Psalm, which is identified in the title as a Psalm of David. David wrote 73 of the Psalms, which are attributed to his name and authorship. I will sing of kindness and justice to you, Yahweh. To you, O Yahweh, I will sing praises. Now, this is the first two of 8 I will statements. So these are declarations of his intent and design. So he's determined to sing of kindness and justice because they belong to him, they come from him, they flow from him, they are him. And so singing praises, this connects us to the predecessor psalm. I will act wisely in a perfect way. When do you come to me? I walk in the midst of my house. I will walk in the midst of my house with a perfect heart. So having a perfect heart is to have one of integrity and undivided loyalty and fixation on the ways of the Master, who is Yahweh. And this is very much wise and perfect. Now, none of us are perfect in the absolute sense, but perfect is an adjective used to describe imperfect creatures such as Job in Job 1:8. And we are commanded to be perfect in Matthew 5:48, inasmuch as our Father in heaven is perfect. Our perfection is a process. It cannot be attained instantly or absolutely, but inasmuch as we abide in him who is perfect and through whom perfection emanates, we may share and bask in his perfection. I will put no matter of Baal before my eyes. I hate the work of those who fall away. It does not cling to me. So from here on out, the 3rd verse to the 8th is an expression of the doctrine of separatism. This is the Old Testament equivalent of 2 Corinthians 6:14 through 7, whereby we are to keep ourselves at deliberate remove from the world and its ways and sins, but we are not to be so isolated from sinful people as to be unconcerned with their welfare. We have to reach out, and this involves the delicate balancing act of being in the world, but not of the world. Of course, as creatures of time and space, we exist in the physical parameters of the world and are at the mercy of time. And as such, we must respect these limitations and bring as much as we can of the world who is lost and fallen into the ways of Elohim. And hate is, there's nothing unrighteousness about hate. Yahweh himself hates certain things. He doesn't hate anybody, but the list is compiled in somewhere in the 6th chapter of Proverbs. I think there's 7 things that he hates. And Baal was Canaanite storm deity who was to be a perpetual nuisance for the Israelites who were commanded to exclusively worship Yahweh uncompromised and with complete integrity. But Baal was one of the many deities that they, at various locations throughout their history, succumbed to the worship of. A perverse heart turns away from me. I will not know evil. So from a perverse heart, the perverse ideas, as it is translated in other versions, springs from a perverse heart, and from the nature of the heart springs the expressions of the tongue. And so an evil-minded person will speak evil, they will do evil, and it all boils down to the mind, which controls the words, the thoughts, and the actions. And David is determined not to know evil. That means not to do evil. We must certainly know evil and recognize it for what it is and eschew and shun it. but we must not partake of the evil when the temptations and their various forms and manifestations present themselves to us. We must not succumb. Him who secretly slanders his neighbor, I cut off. I will not tolerate one who has a haughty look and a proud heart. So slandering is the spreading of gossip or innuendo with the intent of maligning or injuring someone's reputation. And of course, a real Christian doesn't value their own reputation or anyone else's above their character, but it still should have no place. Those who do value reputations, there's still no place, even if the slander, as in most cases, it's not true. By definition, it's not true. And tolerance is, I feel, in our postmodern society, lauded and exalted as an exclusively virtuous entity. But the fact is that as the permissive society in which we now live tolerates the things which our Heavenly Father forbids, we are experiencing spiritual calamities and national decline because of it. And haughty look and proud heart, a haughty look springs from a proud heart. Remember, the heart and the mind affect the actions and orientations of the body. So he who is prideful in heart, and pride is the sin which led to Lucifer's rebellion, and the expressions on the face will be a dead giveaway to the intents and orientations of one's heart. My eyes are on the trustworthy of the land, to dwell with me. He who walks in a perfect way, he serves me. So the old expression, the old adage that show me your friends and I'll show you your future is applicable to everyone, but especially so for kings. Now, who we surround ourselves with will invariably impact and shape and form our character and nature. So as a king, it is especially incumbent not to surround himself with flatterers and deceivers and wicked men who negatively impact the moral tone that David was determined to direct in a more exalted direction. So he lays the standard here, he who walks in a perfect way. Once more, none of us are perfect in the absolute sense, but it is very much a goal worth striving for. And they will be blessed with serving David. And he was a man with integrity, identified as a man after God's own heart, implicitly in 1 Samuel 3:15, more explicitly in Acts 3:22. And so we can imagine that the character of the courtiers he surrounded himself were all given to the things and ways of God. He who practices deceit does not dwell in my house. He who speaks lies does not stand in my presence. Now, lies, one of the commandments of the Decalogue is to not lie. It's to be honest. And dishonesty and lies and falsehoods tear the social fabric of society asunder. This is especially important to maintain at the royal or courtly level. So he wants nothing to do with them. Anyone who not only says deceitful things, but practices deceitful things are going to be shown the door. There's no place for them at David's house. He was mindful of the responsibility and the burden that he carried and was determined to do it with complete integrity. In order to do that, he had to surround himself with men of integrity who would not falter and would mirror the king whose behavior was modeled and mirrored upon Yahweh. Each morning I uproot all the wicked of the land, to cut off all the workers of wickedness from the city of Yahweh. So this was a daily endeavor, and the work never ceases because evil is an untiring force which is with us in all times and all places. So you cannot expel the evildoers from a society or city. The city of Yahweh would have been Jerusalem, which was elevated by David to the capital city of Israel, where it has remained ever since. And there's no place for any evildoers or purveyors of wickedness in any society. Sadly, this is the fact of human history, that all civilizations carry uncivilized people, but David is determined to have nothing to do with them and to remove them from the land by force if necessary, and from the city of Yahweh, which is Jerusalem, which exists as the exalted expression of his splendor, and the ancient Jews held it in a highly affectionate regard as expressed in places such as Psalms 48:2 and Psalms 52. And David was the one who established Jerusalem as the capital city. He took it from the Jebusites, which were the indigenous inhabitants, and has remained ever since, in one form or another, as the capital of Israel. And President Trump recently recognized it as the capital of Israel, unlike any of his baby boomer predecessors who gave lip service to the notion but fell short of the required action. So that's all the time we have for today. Thank you so much. I'm glad you're here. Stay tuned. Until next time, I'll see you then. Bye-bye.